Hey everyone, hope you're doing well today. I'd like to welcome you back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. This video is Lesson 65. We're going to cover page 73 in the book today. We're going to talk about syncopated notes, the natural sign, and apply it to the song, Why Am I Blue? You can also see I've got my pedal camera activated today, so we're going to be doing a little bit of pedal as well, which we're going to save closer to the end of the lesson. But first, let's talk about syncopation. And syncopation is something that is strictly involved with rhythm, not so much notes. It is one of the most challenging, or it can be one of the most challenging aspects of music, but also one of the most rewarding. It's involved with a lot of styles, such as jazz and blues and rock and pop. You don't see it as much with classical hymns, perhaps some marches, which are more strict rhythms. But syncopation really can be a lot of fun and just opens up rhythms and music in general to all sorts of cool ideas. So at the top of page 73, it says up there, notes played between the main beats of the measure and held across the beat are called syncopated notes. So what does that mean exactly? So there's a little diagram to the right. In that diagram, we are in 4/4 time. You got a couple eighth notes there tied to a half note. So when we got eighth notes, you know, we're going to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in, which they've written out there for us. But on that fourth eighth note, that last eighth note there, which is tied to the half note, that is our syncopated note. So notice that eighth note comes in on and, specifically the and of beat 2. Now it said there, notes played between the main beats. What are the main beats? That would be 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the ands are not main beats. The ands are like the halfway point between the beats. Some people call those the weak part of the beat or weak beats. But the main beats can also be called the big beats or the strong beats. Those are your numbers. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that eighth note that comes in that they've labeled the syncopated note is between beats 2 and 3. So for syncopation to occur, it has to come in on a weak beat. In this case, the and, between 2 and 3. And in addition to coming in on the weak beat, it has to be held across the next main beat. Now the next main beat is beat 3. Because of the tie there, it is still held. And that creates syncopation. So it doesn't take just a note being played on the and to create syncopation. Because if I broke that tie, and let's try this right now. I'm going to play middle C. If I played this rhythm without the tie, it's going to go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That is not syncopation. But if I apply the tie, it is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, this is a very simple form of syncopation. It can get certainly more complex. But we're going to start easy, of course, just introduce it today. But that right there in a nutshell, that's what syncopation is. It comes in on the weak part of the beat, so in between the main beats, and it's held across one of the main beats. Now you can hold it forever. You can hold it, in this case, to the end of the measure. You can hold it maybe just another half a beat. The point is on beat 3, if I'm not playing something, and it doesn't mean a rest either when I say not playing something, I'm still holding this note. That's the key, I'm holding it. Then it's syncopation. So a visual cue to syncopation would be a tie. Do all ties mean syncopation? No. We've had ties, earlier in this book. There was no syncopation. But for syncopation to occur, most of the time, you will see a tie associated with it. So in the song, Why Am I Blue, look at measure 1 and look in the treble clef. We see 2 curved lines there, not to get these confused. The top curved line that goes over all those notes. Now that's a slur. That means to play it smooth. But look at the G's, the last eighth note. followed by the half note. That's a tie right there. That's syncopation. That half note comes in on beat 3, just like our example did. But the music itself, when I play that G, actually comes in on the and, the 8th note right before it. Okay? So I'm not playing that half note. I'm holding it. It's tied. In fact, that first measure, that rhythm, is the exact same rhythm that we saw in the example up top. And if you look at the second line, second measure, slightly different notes, but it's the exact same rhythm. So that's kind of cool that we're being introduced to syncopation, and they're keeping it simple enough that we're actually getting to use this exact same example at the top of the page in a piece of music. So I like that, keeping it simple. Because like I said, syncopation can become very complex. Now, what's going to make it a little more complex is when we put the left hand with it. Now remember, when I play this example at the top of the page, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, it's not that exciting. It is syncopation, but there's nothing terribly exciting about it. However, when I put the left hand with Why Am I Blue, which we'll do a little bit later, the left hand is doing a different rhythm. The left hand is doing quarter notes, and the right hand is doing eighth notes. Now that's not syncopation, but the moment we hit that syncopation, those G's that are tied, and you see that the left hand does play on beat 3. In fact, the left hand's playing on those main beats. The left hand here is basically, throughout the piece, playing all the main beats, while your right hand is kind of going in between the beats, especially with the syncopation. When you combine the two, that's when you're really going to start to feel it. So if I just did a C chord in my left hand and just played this example on middle C in the right hand, maybe you'll see a little bit more what I'm talking about. So again, by itself, I'm going back to the top of the page again, just playing this rhythm. By itself, again, it sounded like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now if I did quarter note C chords in the left hand, with it, it'll sound like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now I'll do it without counting. So you can kind of feel it a little bit more, because the left hand, again, is basically playing the main beats, and you can feel where that right hand syncopation is coming in between it and then holding through. So, so as I said, it can get more complex, but this lesson is really just introducing just the very beginnings of syncopation. And again, to work syncopation, counting is really the key, which we do in all these lessons. I'm always adamant about proper counting, because it is so important, especially for creating a foundation to build off of. So you got to have that steady count and those precise rhythms. With syncopation, it's going to be really important that we count. So that's basically syncopation, introduction to syncopation. Now, one other thing we're going to introduce in this lesson in the pink box is the natural sign. Now, you've had sharps, you've had flats, you've even had key signatures. We've been playing in the key of G lately. This piece is also in the key of G. Why Am I Blue at the very beginning has the 1 sharp in the key signature. 1 sharp means F sharp. So all Fs are automatically sharped. But what if I wanted an F not to be sharped in the piece? I would need a natural sign to be printed in the music. In the pink box, a natural sign, you can see the symbol there on the left, and it says it cancels a sharp or flat. A note after a natural sign is always a white key. Now that's really important. If you see a natural sign, boom, it's a white key. No black keys at that point. Which is kind of interesting, because we tend to think, the sharps and flats are black keys, but we've learned they are not. Sometimes there are white keys as well. If I take an E and I sharp it, it's actually the F key, right? It's still a white key. But with naturals, that automatically cancels black keys. Naturals are always, always, always white keys. So that's good to know. If you look at Why Am I Blue in the last measure on the top line in the treble clef, there is our F. So normally that'd be sharped, right, because of our key signature. But there's a natural sign. So it's that natural sign there that's going to remind us to play just a plain old F. and not sharp it. So the rule is kind of the same when you had sharps and flats, that let's say in that measure I have the same F after it. Now it's a whole note, but let's say, I had a half note and then another F half note. They do not have to put a natural sign next to the second F for it to still be a natural. So remember the rule that sharps and flats remain sharp and flat within the same measure. The same goes for naturals. Now if I'm in another measure and I see an F, it goes back to sharp, right? In this case, because I have an F sharp in the key signature. So if it's a new measure and they want that to be a natural, they're going to have to, once again, write in a natural sign. So the rules are the exact same thing between naturals, sharps, and flats when it comes to something stays sharp, stays flat, or stays natural within the same measure. When the bar line occurs and you're at the end of that measure and into a new measure, then that cancels it out and you're back to following the rules of the key signature. Okay? So that is a natural sign. You're going to see, I believe, a couple of those in this piece. So now let's dig into Why Am I Blue? So as you guessed, this is a blues piece. Moderately slow blues tempo. Obviously, we're going to start slow. I'll leave it up to you how fast you want to go, but we got a lot going on in this piece today, and the syncopation is part of that. So as I said earlier, in the treble clef, the top line there, the first measure, you're playing B. Oh, I'm sorry, you're in the G position, by the way. So you want your right hand thumb to be on the G above middle C. So that's 2 on A, 3 on B, 4 on C, and 5 on D. Our first note is the third finger on B, and we're going up a third to D. And then we're coming right back to B, and then we're coming down another third to G. So this G is our syncopation. It comes in on the and of 2, and we're holding it throughout the remaining 2 beats of the measure. It's the exact same rhythm, as I stated earlier, that we had at the top of the page. So with the counting, it's going to go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now the next measure, the first 4 notes are the same. B, up to D, back to B, down to G, but here it's different. There's no tie. So beat 3 is a B quarter note. So you're going to hold that for 3 and. Now on beat 4, you got your thumb on G, and then this is going to be a little tricky. It says cross 2 over 1. So the 2 is going to the F sharp right below G. So you're going to bring your second finger while holding the thumb on G, you're going to bring it over like this to the F sharp. Now going on to the next measure, we have our F natural. Swing your thumb over right onto the F natural. So again, that was the thumb on G, cross 2 over to F sharp, and then bring your thumb under to F. So you might want to practice that a few times to get comfortable with that. You do want it to be smooth. Again, the right hand throughout this entire piece is all smooth. The exception will be at the very, very end of the piece. But all of this is very smooth. So putting those 2 measures together, measures 2 and 3 with the count, it would go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you got a very long note there, especially going at a slow tempo, that whole note there in measure 3. Now let's put the count together with the entire line. So again, only do this once you're comfortable with the notes. But from the very beginning, it's going to go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. When we get down to the second line, first measure, you've got 4/8 notes that repeat themselves twice. So you start on the D with your fifth finger. You're going to go down a third to B, and then it's just down another note to A and G. And beats 3 and 4 are the same thing. D, B, A, G. So that measure is all eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This next measure is a copy of measure 1 in the right hand, except instead of B naturals, it's B flats. Even with the same finger. So in measure 1, at the very beginning, remember you had B, D, B, G. You're going to do the same thing here. Same rhythm, except it's B flat, D, B flat again because we're in the same measure, so it stays flat, and then G. And as a review, it would sound like this with the count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Going on to the next measure. It's almost like the second measure on the top line, but on maybe 50% of it's the same. You still have a B flat rather than a B. So B flat up to D, back to B flat, down to G. The quarter note is also B flat. Now we don't have any crossing over in the thumb and second finger and all that. You're just going to go second finger on A and then thumb on G. So again, that last measure is B flat, D, B flat, G, B flat, and then A, G. With the count, it would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then look at the third line, first measure. That sneaks up on us. B natural. You may be wondering, now wait a second, you said that the rule is if it's another measure, the bar line at the end of the previous measure where we had the flats cancels out those flats. So why did they put a natural? It doesn't need to be printed in for us to realize that. This is something that has always puzzled me since day one of learning this. We learned the rule, but 9 out of 10 pieces of music in print, even the book that we're learning these rules from, they still will put in a friendly reminder. In other words, for a lot of people, they forget the rule for whatever reason, and they're just used to playing a B flat in those previous two measures. They'll hit a B flat in that third line, just out of habit, just because you're used to it. So, you know, somewhere along the line, someone said, let's put in a B natural. People just forget the rule, you know. So, but a lot of us who remember that rule and are very strict about it get a little confused and say, now why is that natural there? I don't get it. That's what it comes down to. It's just a friendly reminder, you know. So, but, you know, it still sneaks up on you. In other words, visually speaking, because I'm at the end of the second line, and then all of a sudden I gotta, you know, jet over to the beginning of the third line. So that B natural is a little unexpected in that sense, you know. So that may be, in addition, why it's written in there. It kind of sneaks up on you because visually it's now over here, you know, at the bottom of the third line. I mean, the beginning of the third line. If we saw it, you know, it printed at the end of the second line, maybe it wouldn't have sneaked up on us. So that's part of it too. So a lot of these things sometimes can be just visual, you know, it's just because where the music's going on the page. So that's what it boils down to. And you will see it a lot. You'll see it more often than the rule itself. You'll see friendly reminders of natural signs put in there. Or the other way around. You might see a reminder of an F sharp, even though it's in the key signature. So. Going on the third line. So that, by the way, that B natural is a whole note, 4 counts. Now in the second measure, this should be familiar. We've had this before at the beginning of the second line. D, B, A, G. D, B, A, G. So we did have that exact passage, exact measure actually, the beginning of the second line. Now going on to the last measure of the third line, we have this little back and forth between C and B. C, B, C, B, C, D. Here's syncopation again on this D. Now it occurs a little bit later in the measure, but the rule is still intact. That D comes in on the and of beat 3, and you're holding that D through beat 4. So counting that last measure would go like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now it sneaks up on us. We go to a B flat. We were just hitting some B naturals. So down at the bottom line, B flat. So going back and forth between a B natural and a B flat is pretty typical of the blues style. So that's why that's occurring. Gives it that sound. So at the bottom line, B flat up to D, back to B flat, down to G, back to B flat once again, and then ending it on A. There's syncopation again on the A. It comes in on the and of 3. We're holding it through 4. So counting that measure is going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we're going to go to a G for 4 counts. Now the next measure, I believe, is something new. The next measure is often referred to as our first ending. There's a first ending, and the last measure you see there is our second ending. So the first ending has a bracket across the top, and there's a little 1. In parentheses, it says play first time only. So notice at the end of that measure, there's a repeat sign. So you're going to take that repeat all the way back to the beginning and play the piece a second time through. So you're going to play this piece 2 times through. But when you get to the end of the piece, you're going to play your first ending the first time through only. So we're about to play that first ending. We're going to repeat the piece. When you repeat it, you're playing the second time through. So when you get to the end here, you're going to skip that first ending, because remember, you play it first time only. You're going to skip it, go to the last measure, which you play the second time. Okay? So like I said, we've gone through this 1 time, so we're approaching our first ending. We just had the G for 4 counts. We're going to go up to a D. And these notes we're about to play are going right down the scale, and they're in pairs. So 2 Ds, 2 Cs, 2 Bs, and 2 As. And we're going to go right back to the beginning. That's something you want to practice. When you go back to the beginning, don't play a piece like, oh, it ends there, I can take a break, I'm going to start all over again. No. It's meant to go on without interruption. There's no rest, there's no pause. Again, it's a visual thing. Visually, we see, there's the end. I see the bar lines. Yeah, there's a repeat sign, but that looks like a definitive ending. And then I got to go all the way back to the beginning and start again. Oh, it's only written that way on paper, but musically, it's like the beginning is written right after this measure. So there's no pausing. And so you're going to have to practice that, getting used to knowing where you're going. In other words. So study that. Where are you going exactly? You've got, on beat 3 down there in that first ending, you were playing Bs. Beat 4, you play As. When you go back to the beginning, you go back to a B. So kind of memorize that. Say after this A, I'm going right back to a B. And then continue to measure. As far as counting, those are just straight eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So I'm going a little fast right now, but just to show you how it's going to be very fluid in your repeat. So let's pretend that we've taken the right hand through the second time, and we've gotten down to the last measure. Well, before we do the last measure, let's say the second measure on the bottom line. So there's our G for 4 counts. And as I said, you're going to skip the first ending and go over to the second ending. Now there's a quarter rest on beat 1. But then after that, you've got something pretty tricky. You've got to move your thumb to F sharp and your 4th finger to D sharp. And you want to get to the point where you're on the G and you go to those right away. Well, you do have a quarter rest, but you still got to make the move pretty quick. Now, as far as looking down at the keyboard, so, on the music, it looks a little tricky. The F sharp is in the key signature, so there's not a sharp sign written in. Now, you could write one in. If I see two sharp signs, that to me is a better visual aid of like, oh, okay, I'm going to two black keys. In this case, we haven't gotten to any sharps yet that are white keys. So at least for now, we can say, yeah, sharps are black keys. But if you look on the keyboard, an F sharp and a D sharp, look at where they occur. The F sharp is to the left of the three black keys. The D sharp is to the right of the two black keys. So F sharp and D sharp is kind of like all the way to the, if you have the 5 black keys, it's all the way to the left, D sharp's all the way to the right. So that's a pretty cool visual cue down on the keyboard. I think it's easier to see that than, what's there in the music. So once you recognize this, kind of stick with it. Now, the cool thing is what's coming after that, the G and the E. Again, it's going to be easier to see what's happening down here. The G and the E, these are both called a half step up from the notes that we're on. A half step is the very next key, in this case, to the right. So the very next key to the right of an F sharp is a G. The very next key to the D, right of a D sharp is an E. And notice how I slid off this. Now, I don't know if a lot of people do this, but I like doing this. You can slide off and just drop right there. It makes it smooth. It makes it pretty easy to find. You could be, it's almost like I could be sloppy with this and be accurate. So that's kind of a cool thing. So once you get past this G, knowing where you're going, yeah, it's good to read the sheet music, but once you figure out the sheet music's asking us to do, I recommend looking down at your keyboard and aiming for those black keys and then sliding off. In fact, when you slide off, you could do it with your eyes closed, because literally you're feeling just for the very next keys to the right. So you're going from 2 black keys to 2 white keys. Yes, you have your left hand to contend with, but hopefully that left hand will be easy for us. It's just a G chord. But we'll get to that in a moment. Now, the counting for that last measure, remember you got your quarter rest. So the quarter rest is 1 and 2 and. So those are eighth notes, and that's syncopation. Because I'm playing on the and of 2 and holding it through beats 3 and 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let's go back to the beginning and look at the left hand. There's only 3 chords in this piece. So we're going to go to the G position. So in the G position, you got your 5th finger on the G below middle C. And then it's 4 on A, 3 on B, 2 on C, and thumb on D. Your very first chord in the piece, and it extends throughout the entire top line, is the G chord. G, B, and D. And then we just covered these chords in the last measure, last lesson. So if you need extra assistance review on these chords, go back to lesson 64, where we talked about the primary chords in G major. So this goes all the way down to the second line. Now, when you hit the second line, you're going to rest for 3 beats. And then in the second measure, you're going to go to the C chord, the 4 chord in the key of G major. So that's G, C, and E for 2 measures. When you get to the third line, you're back to the G chord. Now, if you've studied up on the blues formula, this piece follows it. 4 measures on the 1 chord, 2 measures on the 4 chord, 2 measures on the 1 chord. So this is going through the 12-bar blues formula. The last measure of the third line is our 5-7 chord. That's our D7. So that's the F sharp with your 5th finger, C and D, with 1 and 2. Going down to the bottom line, our 4 chord. So that's the G, C, and E. And the next measure is the G chord. Now on that first ending, we've got our D7, our 5-7 chord for 2 counts. And then we're going to rest for 2 counts. And then remember, we repeat to the beginning, so we're back to our G chord. So you're going to play through the piece a second time. When you're on the bottom line, the second measure, you're on the G chord. Well, that's cool because you're going to stay on that G chord in the last measure on the second ending. So you have, in the second ending, the last measure, you got the G chord on beat 1, quarter rest on beat 2, and then come in on 3 and 4. And every chord except the one half note, no, there's two half notes near the end, every one of them is a quarter note. So our left hand is our metronome. It's keeping that steady beat. And now we're going to put the hands together, and you're going to see how, especially these measures with the syncopation, is going to feel a little more syncopated because of that left hand. This is where it's going to get it's going to require some work, I'll put it that way. For some of you, you may just feel it. For others, you might have to break this down, and that's where the counting is imperative. The first measure, so we're in the G position. So playing it by itself, not a problem. Putting it together, here we go. So I got both hands here on beat 1. Make sure, of course, the obvious, that they all come in together. On the and of 1, I've got my D in the right hand. Now both hands come together on beat 2. And then the and of 2, I've got my right hand on G. That's the last note my right hand will play in this measure. When you hit that G, fall down with weight, because you're not going anywhere. You may be tempted to, because your left hand plays on beat 3, plays again on beat 4. You might have that temptation to play along with it, because we're just wired that way. When you hit that G, you're done. Tell yourself, that's it. I'm a lead brick, and I cannot move that thumb until the next measure. So again, measure 1, hands together on beat 1. Right hand on the and. Hands together on beat 2. Right hand on the and, excuse me. Only the left hand on beat 3. Only the left hand on beat 4. And hold these quarter notes out. So don't do this. Don't do together on beat 1 and then lift your left hand on the and. Don't do that. Gotta hold it down the full beat. Putting it all together with the count, it's gonna go like this. 1 and 2. Second measure, together on beat 1, right hand on the and. Together on beat 2, right hand on the and. Both hands hold 3 and. And now on beat 4, you got to contend with the crossover in the right hand. So you're together on 4, crossing over to the F sharp, and then together on the last measure. Now this last measure has pedal. And you're going to hold that pedal through beat 1 of the second line. So once you get to the last measure, when you hit beat 1, your foot goes down the same time. Hold it down. Now, when I go to my second line, first measure, to be more specific, notice I'm lifting my hands on purpose. I'm doing that right now to show you that I'm getting ready to play measure 2, but my foot stays down. When I go down on beat 1, my foot will come up. So I'm coming down, and as soon as I hit these keys, my foot comes up. So by the time I play the B on the and of beat 1, I am not down on the pedal. I said earlier, holding it through beat 1. You're really holding it through beat 4 until beat 1, if that makes sense. I'm being very specific, but that's how the pedal works. You're coming off the pedal as you're going down on the keys. So again, I'm here on the last measure. When I go to my next line, down, up, down on the keys, my foot comes off the pedal. So since your pedal doesn't even come in until the last measure, I recommend either having the foot right next to the pedal, so you can just come up and over it, or have it resting on the pedal. Now, some pedals are stiff. You can rest your foot and it won't go down, or won't go down so much as to, actually have the pedal effect. You may be on a loose pedal where the slightest touch and it goes down. In that case, you either have to support your own weight, keep your foot off of it a little bit, or again, just keep your foot to the side and use your heel to swing it over. Do not pick up your foot. Just a review, do not pick up the entire foot. Your heel should never leave the ground when you deal with pedal. Your heel is either going to, help with this motion or help moving it back and forth, but your heel does not come up. Now, I'm on a piano where I can rest my foot. So from the very beginning, and I'm just going to go through this quickly to show you, I'm off the pedal in terms of holding it down, but I'm going to go down when I get to that last measure. And then pop off. Okay, so going on to that second line first measure, remember your hands are together on one and then your left hand is off the remainder of the measure. 2 and 3 and 4 and. When you get to measure 2, you're changing chords in the left hand, so you might need to practice that. And you have the B flat in the right hand. So you're together on beat 1, the right hand on and. Together on beat 2, the right hand, and then the right hand stays down. Syncopation once again. Chord on beat 3, chord on beat 4. Next measure, hands together. And then the right hand. Both hands, and then the right hand. Both hands hold on 3 and then 4. Hands together, right hand on the and. And here's our pedal again. Third line, first measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and it's that down up motion. As soon as I go down on the keys, I'm off. I said earlier I'm going to keep my foot on there. Well, I find myself swinging it over, so whatever works for you. Apparently I'm going to do both. So measure 2 there, going on. You got the B on the and of beat 1, you're still holding your chord, but when you get to beat 2, it's all right hand. And when you get to the last measure, we're on our 5-7 chord. So right hand plays by itself. It's still holding, of course, the chord in the left hand. Together on beat 2, and then the right hand. Together on beat 3, and then the right hand. And then syncopation. Hold that right hand as I play a chord again on beat 4. Here it gets really tricky because all these changes are occurring in every measure. Now at the bottom line, I'm switching chords. My C chord and a B flat. Very tricky. It's going to take a lot of practice right here. So that's together on 1 and 2 and 3 and here's our syncopation, 4 and. Next measure, bring in the pedal. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Got to change to the 5-7 here, up to the D. As I come down, the pedal comes off. 1 and 2 and. So I'm going to hold that chord for 2 beats. When I get to the B's in the right hand on beat 3, I'm off. 3 and 4 and right back to the beginning. So you got to be ready to go back to your G chord in addition to hitting that B. You're going to go through the piece a second time. So down at the bottom line, second measure, we're here with the pedal down. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and I'm going to go to my last measure. This one's a little different. The pedal is still down on this chord. I'm going to pop off the pedal on beat 2 when I hit those 2 black keys in the right hand. And I'm going to come off my chord. So it's 1, 2, and then the last chord comes down on 3. Now they have the pedal there. There's no reason for it. I can easily hold these notes without pedals, so don't worry about using pedal there, only if you want, but it seems like overkill. I personally won't. So again, that last measure, your pedal's already down from the previous second measure. I got my chord in the left hand on beat 1, still holding the pedal. When I go to beat 2, these 2 black keys, I'm coming off my chord and my pedal on beat 2 and 3. And so notice that chord in the left hand comes in after you play the G and the E, because syncopation, right? 2 and then this comes in on 3 and 4 and. Okay, so I'm going to play the whole piece for you now up to tempo so you can hear what it sounds like. I'm going to do the first ending and second ending. I'm going to put in the pedal. And there's a few dynamics, not a whole lot. It's mezzo forte most of the way, but at the end of the third line, there's a crescendo. The right hand will dictate that because Wherever there's more movement in notes, typically that's going to be where your crescendo will take place. And then the first ending has a diminuendo. So getting softer on each of those. And then at the very end, you can almost accent that. It's getting louder, so it kind of feels like it should be an accent on that last chord. All right, I'll give a count off and then I'll go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And you have a fermata there, so you can hold that out. Again, the pedal might mean, you can lift your hands and hold it, but that's totally up to you. All right, so with the faster tempo and playing it right along, you can probably hear that syncopation even more. But as I said at the beginning of the lesson, syncopation is not the easiest thing. Fortunately, this is the easiest example. That being said, still tricky when you add in your left hand. So count, 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 count. And I believe in when you put hands together, sort of like piano aerobics, is it hands together? Is it just the right hand? Is it just the left hand? Maybe even going through that before the counting. So example, first measure, hands together, then it's right hand, hands together, then again it's right hand, then it's just the left hand, and it's just the left hand. Now that being said, hold notes that need to be held. Just because the right hand's playing doesn't mean the left hand necessarily lets go. But that's great for coordination if you can go through the order of, is it hands together or is it hands separate and which one is doing it? So that I find to be pretty helpful too. All right, so probably going to be spending a lot of time on this lesson, and that's okay. There is a lot here. Syncopation, the natural sign, playing in the blues, the first ending, second ending. Technically, that's new for this lesson too. So a lot of new elements. And again, if you don't like this piece, I find it to be a pretty good piece. I think it's kind of fun. But if you don't like it, stick with it anyways, because there's so much we're learning here. If we skip ahead, we're going to get overwhelmed, and you don't want that to happen. So these elements are going to come back, and we're going to be using more and more of them in this book. So I wish you the best of luck. Please ask any questions in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer them right away, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.